Thank you. Now let me turn to Commodore Uday Bhaskar. Writing in Mail, Manoj Joshi wrote, "For India and Japan, China is a benchmark of sorts. Growth of Chinese power has implications for them. Both have outstanding boundary disputes that periodically flare up. But equally important are their concerns relating to economic and military rise of China." Do you share Joshi's views on this?
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. Very glad to be here with all of you. I think the relationship between China and Japan does offer one kind of template for India as it calibrate. और दूध रखें क्या? ठीक है? I would suggest that the China-Japan relationship does offer the outline of a template as India calibrates its own relationship with China over the next decade or two. There are some salient features about the China-Japan relationship which Manoj Joshi's article has referred to. One is they have a very, very bitter historical legacy. The Chinese perception of Japan World War II is something that is kept alive as far as the Chinese narrative is concerned. Concurrently, they have a territorial dispute over the islands. At the same time, it has not prevented them from forging a very robust trade and economic relationship. So I think this particular contradictory compulsion and the way in which the two countries are managing it may offer some cues to India. But I would not go along with the suggestion that there is any kind of congruence as far as the bilaterals are concerned. Meaning that China-Japan has a certain distinctive context, a history, and the China-India relationship, I would suggest, has a different texture to it. Therefore, while we can perhaps study it in terms of calibrating the Indian position over the next 5 to 10 years, I'd personally say that this would be a very big challenge for Prime Minister Modi as he prepares for his visit in May. But this is going to be part of the tightrope that you had alluded to, Ambassador Kumar, when you had framed this particular discussion.
Well, let me ask one more question. While the US, India and Japan stoutly reject any suggestions that they are trying to contain China, in China's eyes, closer American, Indian, Japanese relations mean just the same. There is a deep suspicion against the US and Japan. To India's advantage, this motivates China to try to draw India closer, notwithstanding the pending boundary question and India's own apprehensions about China's increased involvement in South Asian countries on India's periphery. How far can these apparent contradictions be managed?
These apparent contradictions will have to be managed very innovatively. Now, specific to the India, Japan and United States, there is no doubt that any attempt at trying to have a closer relationship between these three countries, particularly in the security, strategic, and I would say more specifically in the maritime domain, will cause a certain anxiety in China. We have seen this in the past. I think Professor Kondapalli had referred to it. You will recall that when there was reference to a multilateral naval exercise, which initially the Malabar was India-US, it grew slightly larger and they had brought in both Singapore, and when Japan came on board, it caused an enormous amount of, I would say, concern in Beijing, so much so that when UPA-1 was at the helm of affairs in India, the government of India decided to recast it. So I think there is a certain sensitivity there which India acknowledges. But at the same time, I think as far as the areas of possible cooperation as far as India, Japan and the United States are concerned, I personally would make a case that they should be pursued. The logic being that you are then able to shape the environment, both politically, strategically and in the maritime domain, in a manner that would perhaps encourage China also to come within the framework that is being outlined. Now, this is a contradictory tenor, as I said, and it will be a challenge for India particularly, while we may be occupying the equivalent of what could be described as a strategic sweet spot at this point in time. Because it's a paradox. The rise of China causes concern, almost, you might say, within the region. The paradox is that the rise of India is welcomed. And all the major powers are trying to engage with India. China is cognizant of that, and that's part of the tightrope that you spoke about.
Now let me turn to you, sir. The new US Ambassador Richard Burma at India conclave said, at least 30 agreements have been signed between India and the US since Modi's visit. They range from the depths of the ocean to the far reaches of space and everything in between. Going by these words, it must be the golden period of Indo-US relations. Discounting some degree of diplomatic hype, where do you think India-US relations are heading to? Is this relationship largely driven by mutual needs of business, trade, investment, technology in different sectors, or on account of increasing shift of balance of power to Asia dominated by China?
I think the relationship is heading in the right direction in some ways. The US ambassador has spoken of 30 agreements, but I have not seen those agreements in paper, and I do not know what the content of these agreements is. There are some important agreements which actually turned out to be less important than expected on the DTTI business, on the defense side. The most important document that came out from the visit was the joint vision document of the two countries with regard to Asia Pacific and the Indian Ocean. That has some substance in it because it lays down the parameters of future strategic understandings between India and the United States in the Western Pacific area. In other words, the joint vision is heavily oriented towards what might be called China's rise and the potential threat from China. But there's nothing much about the Indian Ocean. And there is nothing at all about the problems of India to the west of our country. In fact, our major problems are there. Yes, China is a problem. China's rise is an issue. But our major problem with China is not in the South China Sea or freedom of navigation there, etc., etc. It's on the border. And on that, the United States doesn't take a position, and we are not inviting the United States to take a position either. United States takes a very relaxed view of our concerns about Pakistan. As we have seen over the years, it continues to harm Pakistan. Even after Obama's visit here, he released $1 billion worth of military and economic aid to Pakistan. United States is pushing for the accommodation of Taliban in the power structure in Afghanistan, its policies in what we call West Asia, whether it's Iraq, Libya, or Syria, or in fact, if you look at the reasons why the Islamic State has appeared on the scene, our interests are not being served. Even now, with the kind of action Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries are taking against Yemen, our interests are not being served because the whole area is being destabilized and we have huge equities there. So if you look at our strategic interests as a whole, we have greater convergence with the United States to the east, but convergence to the west has yet to be achieved. Insofar as what is motivating the United States, it's interesting when India's growth story became less attractive and our growth rates went down, then everybody said, oh, the relationship has reached a plateau, the White House has lost interest in India, etc., etc. The moment Modi came to power and he outlined a very forward-looking development agenda and the general growth story began to be better, you found the United States taking much greater interest in India, and the plateau was converted into a peak to climb. So I think the major reason is business. And the reason why the China-US relationship has developed to the point where it is, I just finished, it's because of the interest of the U.S. corporate sector. But yes, the other element is also there. I won't discount it, but the more powerful element is the business element.